Welcome to our live demo on buffing. Today we're going to talk about the basics of buffing. So we're going to cover what happens when you buff, different wheels, the different compounds, and some safety, and then some tips and tricks like we've been doing with the previous one. So let's get started. So buffing is basically it's a pretty basic concept. You're just getting rid of the extreme highs and lows when you're doing buffing in metal. So if you have a really high spot or a really low spot, trying to even those all out so it's as flat as possible so you can bring up the brilliant finish of whatever metal that you're buffing or polishing is. So now you got the basics of that. I'm going to get into this showing you the different wheels first. And we're going to start with the most aggressive and work our way up to the most fine that's going to give you the really high luster. So the first one here that we have available is this. It's an expanding wheel is what we call it. So this wheel has a rubber core center and it's pretty soft. So you can see they have some voids cut in this and that allows it to have some give to it. Now this may just look like kind of like a grinder, like a big grinder wheel, but that give is the key. So when you're sanding, you get into recesses and things like that, you can't hog out and make a groove in your metal. This will give some and it'll just smooth. So this comes with different bands that come on the outside and a number of different grits. So you can get it up even to some real fine, almost 1200 grit if you work it well enough. But this is really most effective when you're doing casting or rough or metal or pits or things like that. This is going to really blast through it really easily. So that's the first one here. Now we'll move on to the buffed wheels. So the first one here is a sisal is what it's called. It's this is a really heavy aggressive cutting wheel. So this one is good for steel, iron, stainless, those types of metals, a little harder metals, or something again that's sand cast that's really rough. You'd start with something like this. Now it uses, most times we're going to be using like emery or a compound like that, or greaseless solutions, which we'll show you in a little bit, with this wheel. Now the material that's made out of it is actually similar to the material that's used in like binder's twine, like you'd see for newspapers or magazines. This is a similar material, or even like if you look at it, it's like baler's twine. So when you run your hand on this, you can feel it's pretty rough, and this is going to cut really fast. So this is kind of like your first step when you're doing anything that's really heavily cast or really hard to buff materials. So that's the first one. Now the next that we're going to be talking about here, I'm going to pick up a couple of them. These are our spiral-sewn. So these can be sewn a little different on each one, and it's just for the different configuration, a little softer, or this one that's sewn has a lot more stitching in it. That one's going to cut a little harder. But they're both basically considered a medium cut buff wheels. And you'd use these generally with Tripoli. This is going to be your workhorse, basically. This is going to be the buff wheels that you're probably going to be using the most, because these are going to be working it out and getting it basically till you get to that nice shiny finish. So you want to keep a bunch of these around for your different compounds, and you can do a two-step process where you can work with one that's heavily stitched like this, and work up to one like this that's going to have a little more give to it. So that's those basic two. Remember, these are going to be the ones that are going to be probably most important for you. Now, another one that's, this is the one that a lot of guys will basically just stop with. This is our loose section buff. So this is basically just a bunch of real fine pieces of cotton. Almost feels like felt there on the edge. But these ones just have a single stitch in the center, and they're really loose. So this isn't going to do much cutting at all. This is more for final buffing or coloring. Now, coloring is basically just a term that they use in the industry for like a mirror finish. So this is going to bring out the final natural shine of the metal that you're polishing or buffing. So you're going to use this with the white rouge, which we'll be showing you the different types of compounds in a little bit. But this is the white rouge one that you'll be using. Most guys are fine with working up to this wheel and the white rouge. That's going to give you a highly close to mirror polish by doing that. And that's fine for most people. But if you want to take it to the next step and get the like show finish, the real mirror finish that your wife could do her makeup in, this is the one you're going to want here. You're going to want to use our Canton wheel here. This is a Canton flannel wheel. And this is the most delicate wheel that you're going to use. It's going to bring out the brilliant shine of the metal, and it's used basically only for coloring or the really high polishing. And this one, you only want to use this with the white or jeweler's rouge. So this, again, this is the final one. And a little tip is you don't want to mix this at all, even if it's your last buffing wheel you got laying around. Don't mix this one with the Emery or the Tripoli or anything like that, because it doesn't work well with this. And if you try to reuse this again, no matter how much you clean it, at this stage where you need to be with this, it's probably going to scratch the metal. So keep these separate aside and only use them for jewelers or white rouge. So those are the basic buff wheels that we have available for our buff motors. Now we also have, which we're going to show in a little bit, we have a kit that comes with our small buff kit that you can basically use a drill, and it comes with all these different shapes of bobs and buff wheels. It comes with the loose section and the spiral sewn like we showed you already. But this is a cheap, affordable kit that's around 40 bucks. You can get this kit, but this is great for getting into tight areas. You can do like wheels and like things that are more intricate. These are great for using that for. So it's really good to have this kit around, and also a buff motor with the big wheels to really effectively buff most anything that you're going to come across in automotive restoration. So now we showed you the different wheels and gave you a rundown. We're going to go through the compounds. Now it's a multi-step process like we talked about. So you're going to have a bunch of compounds, and a lot of times our customers, we get questions, which compound should I use for here and there, and you know when to get to the next compound. So I'm going to show you each of those. And we're going to go from the most aggressive down to the brilliant shine at the end. So this one here is our Emery. It's probably going to be tough to see, but this one's generally black or a dark gray color you'll find. Each company's compounds may differ in color, so you may come across one that ours is black or gray here, and theirs might be a lighter hue of gray or not black or whatever. You want to make sure you check with whatever kit or brand you're buying to make sure that what they consider Emery is whatever color. So after all that, this is Emery. This is going to be your heaviest cutting, fast cutting compound. Now these compounds are made up basically of a wax type substance, and then there's an additive that's put into it that's like that's aggressive additive put in here that's actually going to do the cutting. Now each of these compounds, they have different grits, just like you would sandpaper, that are added in with the waxy substance. That's what actually does the cutting. So when you have these and you put it on the wheel, the reason they have the waxy substance is when you put the heat from putting it against the buff wheel, it's going to actually melt it on, and that's what makes it become like the glue to grip your buff wheel. So this one here, again, is the Emery. It's a really fast cutting. It's great for hard metals. This is going to basically be your step one. That's going to be for irons, stainless steel, those type of things. So you want to start with this if you got a really rough part, and then you can go from there. So that's the first one. Again, that's like a black color generally. Now the next one, this is basically mainly for stainless steel only. It can be used on some irons and things like that on harder materials, but this is, we generally call it our stainless compound. But you want to use this on spiral or ventilated wheels, and this is basically step two for stainless or real hard metals, mostly stainless. So this is going to be like your intermediate step versus some of the other metals. So this one for us is generally, again, a gray in color, so it's good to put a piece of tape or mark your compounds, because as they wear down, you're going to get rid of the little notches. We put little ticks on the back of these just to tell you what it is, but as you get down, you're going to end up ripping that piece of cardboard off and forget what it is. So make a mark, because there's a big step difference between the Emery and the step two here. So you could be going backwards if you switch them between themselves. So the next one is, like we said, the spiral-sewn is like the workhorse of the buffing wheels. This is the Tripoli. Tripoli is the workhorse of your compounds. So this is going to be the compound that you're probably going to be using the most. This one does a lot of work. You probably go through this twice as fast as you're going to go through like the white rouge or the jeweler's rouge. So this one's great to keep around. This is really step one for aluminum and copper and brass, some of the softer metals. This is going to be your step one. The other ones are a little too aggressive and probably are going to cut a little too fast. So you use this with aluminum. You can even use this on like plated. So if you have something that's anodized or chrome plated, you could use this to lightly bring up the shine in those. Now you're going to be using spiral-sewn again, or ventilated buffing wheels with this compound. So as you can see, there's a bunch of compounds you're going to be using with those wheels, but this one you're going to really take some time on. This one's where you're going to start to see some shine. Those other ones are just going to kind of smooth it out. You're going to start seeing a shine here. You almost start to see a light reflection if you kind of run your finger above the part. When you're going through this, that's when it's about time to move to the next one. You can start seeing a reflection with your finger. So after you have the Tripoli, you're then going to move on to your white rouge. So this is pretty much almost every manufacturer. Obviously, it's in the name, white rouge. It's going to be white. So this is kind of step 2 for aluminum, copper, brass, steel. This is the one that a lot of guys are fine with stopping with. This is where you can work it with the different buff wheels and work your way up to the Canton, and you can get a pretty darn good mirror finish with this. So this one is really considered for the final coloring, and that's going to be the brilliant shine that you're looking for that you see on most cars. And for instance, I'll grab from here. This wheel is one I did with the Tripoli. So it's a little dirty because it's been sitting around, but you can see that it's really pretty darn shiny. And this is fine for most people. But if you want that, really top show car quality finish, then you're going to want to move on to the next compound here. Set this down carefully without dropping it. That's going to be our jeweler's rouge. So this is generally like a red or maroon color. Most of the brands I've seen out there are that way. So this is really step 3 for pretty much any metal. This is going to be your final polish. This basically has no cutting agent in it that's going to be abrasive at all. So this one's just for final coloring, mirror polishing. You're going to want to really only use this one with like the flannel Canton wheel, or like the like a final felt like a buff wheel. So this is just for the real fine ones, and it's only going to do that. It's just going to take it from the white rouge that's pretty darn reflective to like a mirror. This is going to be almost chrome if you work it well enough with this. So this one's a great final step. If you have the patience to go that far, this really makes a difference between a pretty good polished part to like a wow, this is amazing polished part. So this is a really good one. So the last compound here, I know we're talking about metal, but this is the last one that we offer in a lot of our kits. I figured I'd just show it while we're there. This is a blue rouge that we offer. This is basically really only for plastic. It's really hot, really light cutting, so there's not much cutting at all, but it does have a little bit of a cut to it, and it's for plastic. So a good idea, like Lexan windows or something like that, you can use this to kind of bring them back and make them, to bring the clarity back in those. You'd use this with the spiral-sewn wheel. Really, that's the only one that you're going to be using it with. It's a kind of one-step process, but it's good to mention if you have anything that's plastic, this will bring it back if you work it lightly. So now that we've shown you those, the last one that I mentioned, I alluded to, and it's not very appealing looks-wise, but this is our greaseless compound that we offer. We offer it in a number of different grits, but this is more of a really highly aggressive compound. So the greaseless compound is, it goes from like an 80 grit, which this is, all the way up to a 320. This is what you're going to want to use if it's like a cast manifold, or if you have an old set of sand cast aluminum wheels. This is what you want to start with. You put this on your buff wheels, on the buff motor, you can really blast through some rough pieces of metal and get them nice and flat and smoothed out. So it's good to have these kits. These are a little different. You're going to actually apply this, and you have to sit and wait it and let it dry before you actually start applying, before you start buffing. And make sure that you keep these at a really high heat. I've had instances where I had these in the garage in 100-degree weather, and it actually starts to melt a little bit, so they are susceptible to that. So make sure you keep them in a kind of climate-controlled area. So we're not going to really show you this one in action. It's a little bit messier to show you on camera, but this one's really good for fixing the casting. And I have one part here that we just hit up real quick that I wanted to show you. It's just an old supercharger casing here. So you can see, if I can hold it well enough for the camera, this is the original really rough casting. We used the expander wheel and a little bit of the greaseless compound in here to smooth it out. So this made it way smoother, and just spent a few minutes on just in this little section here, smooth it out versus the rough casting side. Makes a big difference. And trying to do a buff wheel with this is not going to work. You're going to spend hours and hours, and you're not even going to be to this smooth. So remember, it's easier to start with the more aggressive compound on something like this and work your way up than to spend hours trying to buff it with just a Tripoli or something like that. So hopefully you can see with that. So now that we've got the compounds down and we've got the wheels down, now we're going to talk about safety. First thing about safety with buffing, you got a wheel on a buff motor on the drill that's spinning pretty fast. You can get things caught in it. So you want to make sure that you're wearing pretty tight clothing. If you have long hair, you got it tied back. And you want to make sure you wear the proper safety protection. I got one of our Eastwood work jackets on here. I always button the sleeves here to make sure it's nice and tight so that I don't get anything caught in the wheel. So the first thing that you need is, of course, just safety glasses. So you want to put on some safety glasses, make sure nothing gets in your eye, of course, just like anything when you're working. And the next thing is our dust mask here, this face shield. We sell these. These are really good. A lot of times guys don't use these and they regret it. When you're buffing, it's throwing compound, it's throwing material back at you. So if you didn't wear this, within a few minutes you're going to have a black face. So it's really good to wear this to both save your face from getting covered in dirt, but it's also for safety precautions. If anything flies off, it's not going to puncture you if you put it hits you in the face. So put that one on. Then of course I like to use just some just generic leather work gloves. You can get these at the the Tractor Supply store or something like that. You need to put something on your hand so if you get against the wheel, a lot of times when you're buffing, you're getting pretty close to that spinning wheel, and you don't want to accidentally get your finger caught or hit in it. So I want to put those on, and then generally when I'm doing a lot of buffing, I'm going to use like a little dust mask or some kind of face respiratory type protection. So today I'm just doing really light buffing. I'm just going to do a few seconds here and there so you guys can still hear me. I'm gonna not wear this for just a little bit, but if you're doing heavy cutting and rough buffing, if you're spending hours buffing, definitely make sure you wear that. Those black boogies that you put out, you come out at the end of the day, those are not good. They're going through your system. You don't want those. So now we got all our safety protection going. Next thing we're going to show you on the buff wheel here is the safe area of a buff motor. There's a safe area when you're buffing, and we're using today just a 1/2 horsepower single speed buff motor that we sell at Eastwood. And we're also, it's on our economy stand. So this is the most basic setup you can get, and it's really affordable. For about basically $200, you can have a nice little buffing setup that this can do 90% of the work that a guy at home is going to be doing. We also offer a 2-speed, 1-horse model that's a little more towards the professional side. If you're doing a lot of buffing, you may want to step up to that one, but we're just going to show you this one today. It's really good. It works well. So the safe half of the buff wheel. So this buff motor here spins down like this. So it's spinning down towards the ground. There's a safe part. You want to stay on the side here. You want to stay below. You want to stay towards the bottom half of that. You don't want to get up above that into this area, because that's going to want to catch whatever you're buffing, throw it at you. It's going to just throw it across the room. So you need to make sure that everything around you, just in case that happens, that your work area, you don't have anything that can get damaged. You don't want a car window or people to be standing around you when you're doing this. Even if you're really skilled, it can happen. You could get grabbed and throw across the room. So I'm going to show you just real quick and lightly what just how the kick is when that happens, and show you where the safe area of the wheel is. And then we'll show you how to put some compound on next, and then I'll just do a little bit of buffing with some Tripoli on the compound. So I'm going to show you let me grab a part here, just a little scoop that we use for testing and things. So this is a little piece we have here. So flick this on, and like I said, it's rotating down. So when you're buffing, you want to have a nice wide stance, and you want to grip the part really firmly. The second you start letting go of this part and loosening your grip, it could get grabbed and thrown across the room. So make sure you're always grabbing this pretty tightly. So you want to stay, like I said, towards the bottom part of the wheel. And you can work it back and forth. So that's just a quick demonstration of the safe part. Now Now the bad part that you don't want to, obviously get towards the top, and I'm going to try and kind of dramatize it for you, but you don't want to get up towards the top because it's going to start kicking, and you can hear it kind of grab when you can get there. It's not nice, it wants to throw it back at you. So you want to stay again towards the bottom half of the wheel and just work the front or the face of the wheel. So while we have that on, I'm going to show you next how to apply some compound, and then I'll just do a little buffing section and kind of show you the action a little bit. And I'm going to do the back side of this here. You can see we buffed to here, and then right in there is an area we haven't touched yet. So I'm going to work in that area real quick with the Tripoli just to do some quick smoothing and bring the polish out a little bit. You can see how quickly you can get an area like that buffed up. So I'll set this down for a moment, and we'll get the this is out of the small kit that we have opened up. This is the Tripoli. So now this right here, when you're doing the compound, a lot of mistakes that people make is they put too much compound on. They put too heavy. They really just jam it into the wheel and just don't get on. That's bad. You don't want to do that. You only really want to put it on for like a second or two at a time, and that's it. Light pressure, second or two at a time. Let the wheel do the work. It'll put sufficient amount of compound on the wheel. So again, you want to stay towards the bottom half of the wheel, and we're doing a tightly sewn, spiral sewn piece here. So you just go back and forth. That's like 2 seconds. That's basically all you need to start buffing. It's better to put on a little bit of compound often than to put on too much compound and then have a problem. So let me just show you here on this piece how to buff this. So I'm going to again stay towards the bottom half. You got to be careful of those edges, even when you're towards the bottom there. You saw a little bit. When I get too close to that edge, if you're going against the edge, it wants to pull it in. That's where it's good to have your hands, just right. So I have an edge here. I don't want to go against that. You want to work with it. So I'm going to turn the piece here and work down like that so I don't catch any edges. See if we can get rid of this little bit of division line here. So that's just a quick, I brought it up so you can see how it took a lot of the corrosion away there pretty quickly with the Tripoli. So at this point I probably put a little more compound on, work this area a little more, and then you can eventually, once I get everything nice and smooth, I can then work to another wheel that's maybe a little more loosely sewn, and some more Tripoli to get it, start bringing it up. So that gives you an idea, kind of the angle that you need to stand and how you work the piece. So we just have this buff motor here. Was fighting me a little bit moving. Just for this display here, we moved it in an area you could see, in our studio here. But you really want to try, if you're doing a lot of buffing, you want to try and bolt this down. We just have some sandbags on just for a temporary thing, so you guys can get the best angle when we're doing this. But normally we have this in the other side of the shop. We have this bolted down to the concrete. That's really the best thing that you need to do, but I'm sacrificing my safety just for you guys a little bit. So now that we showed you those basic, some of the buffing with that piece there, we're going to move on basically to the drill with the small kit here. This kit, again, you can just put it on a drill, really easy to use. And I'm going to show you with this wheel here. Let me just pull the cord out of the way here. Oops, sorry. So this wheel used to, started out life like the one we showed you, and this has a little bit of Tripoli that I loaded on here. So we're going to just show you how to do this corner here. And I actually forgot the last time, put my mask down. I apologize. Hopefully you guys can hear me with this down. So put this down here. And Now I'm going to do just this little area here. Best to have this clamped in a vise, but again, just for this, so you guys could see it the best, I'm going to just work it right here. And this is where these conical shaped buff pads are really good. So this works in the edge really nice. So let me set this down. I'll show it to the camera here just so you guys can see. Is that good? Kind of like this in here worked versus the area it's kind of dull. So it was just a quick little buff. It brought it up, and now it's probably hard to see here on the live stream. But just a quick little buff there. You're already bringing that shine back. So that, again, that was just with the Tripoli really fast so you guys could see. But that's why those cone-shaped wheels are really good, because if you try and fit this around the buff motor, I've actually had times where with doing a lip just like this, I was buffing, kind of buffing the inside, and you get around to that bad area of the wheel, and it caught it and threw it. So trying to fit this around the wheel is really dangerous. You don't want to try and do that, even though this is way faster. You want to try and use those conical shaped ones to get into all the corners and buff these areas on something like a wheel, a wheel whip, especially like a deep dish wheel that might get caught, in the buff wheel. So now we showed you the buff, the different buffing ways to buff, and some things to watch out for. We just got a handful of tips and tricks that I was just going to kind of go over. We, everybody here is always buffing stuff for their cars. Kind of quizzed a few guys, some stuff that I've done. They may help you along the way. So one of the first things is when you're trying to determine what you want to buff. So if you have something, a part that you want to buff, again, we'll use this. I'll use this wheel for, instance. If you have this wheel here, and it's, you're not sure if this thing's been clear coated at some point or if it's anodized or whatever, how can you tell before you start if this is bare metal or not? A really quick way, one of our guys, Nick, kind of told me that he uses, and it's really, really great, is he'll use some autosaw, just a white rag like this. And you basically put some autosaw on the rag, and you wipe the piece that you're curious about with the white rag. Now, if this piece is bare metal, what will happen is it's going to turn black when you're rubbing this. So when I'm rubbing this here, it turns black. So that's bare metal. We know this is bare metal. I can start polishing this. Now, if this was anodized, if this was clear coated at some point, it may be difficult to tell, especially if it's something that's been sitting for a while and you're not sure, or even powder coat, some clear powders, it's hard to tell. This isn't going to turn black like this. It's not going to really do much of anything except just be the white autosaw when you rub it. So if you rub it really quick like that, you get a black rag, that's when you know that you're bare metal and you can start polishing or buffing. If it does not, you need to strip it mechanically or chemically before you even start doing any of this process we're talking about. So, or you need to blast it, or you need to move it with a grinder or something like that, or a paint remover. So that's one cool little trick that can save you some time and headaches if you're doing that. Now another thing I hinted to a little bit was keeping your buff pads separate along the way. So if you have buff pads that you have a bunch of buff pads sitting around like this, and you want to keep them separate. So you don't want to mix a pad that you're using mostly only Tripoli on with a pad that you maybe one time used emery on or something else. So you want to keep these separate and labeled. So the thing that we like to do, and I do it around my shop, take a Ziploc bag like this, just a big one, throw your compound that you're using with whatever wheels in here, and then label it. And you're set to go. So that way if the tube of compound gets worn down and you can't see with the writing on it anymore as you rip away the cardboard and you can't tell, this way you can keep it all together and labeled so you don't go backwards when you accidentally use a wheel that's got some other compound on it. So it saves time because you're not fumbling around, and keeps you much more organized in the garage. And even though the compounds are a different color, they just turn black in the end. You know, as soon as you start buffing, they turn black. So you're not going to be able to tell what the heck was on the wheel previously. So that's a cool little thing to keep you organized. So another thing, if in between buffing, in between your different stages of buffing, when you switch compounds, and even, you know, when you start with a wheel, even if you have them separated, like I said, one thing you want to use is, we have a buff rake, is one way to do it. So basically with this, you can clean out your wheels. So you want to use this in between every compound. So this is really good to put on the wheel in between every compound. So you basically hold it like that. It's going to spin down, and it's going to take off the gunk. So I did a little bit here, and you can, it's probably impossible to see, but it's going to pick up all that gunk, and you can easily pick it off. But that's going to clean your wheel in between. So this is a necessity. If you don't have different buff wheels for different compounds, you need to be doing this between each one and thoroughly, because otherwise you're mixing compounds. You're also mixing little fine pieces of metal that get caught in this, especially when you're doing aluminum or, you know, softer metals. So if you don't have one of these and you're in a bind, or if you have the small kit like we talked about, you know, like one of these, it's a lot more difficult to use the rake with, you know, the small job kit like that. You can use a screwdriver, just a usual flathead screwdriver. So you can just hold it against and drag it across lightly, and it'll pull it out. So same thing on this over here. You know, you can put it on there and work it. Now you have to be. It's a little more dangerous with this, with the buff motor here, because it can get caught and throw it across the room. So that's another cool little thing that you can do. Make sure you clean in between. So now that we've covered, you know, some of those things, last couple of things is how to maintain or how to keep your parts that are already highly polished shiny. How do you keep them from dulling up? Because it can happen really quick with a lot of metals. So if you're using something that doesn't necessarily rust, like steel, you know, just your mild steel, if you polish mild steel, you need to coat it somehow, because it's going to flash rust just that quick. You know, any moisture in there, it's going to start rusting. So you need to put something on it. The other metals like you know, copper, aluminum, obviously stainless steel, you don't have that issue, but like aluminum especially, it's going to start dulling or slowly corroding over time. So the first thing you can do that's kind of a temporary solution is, again, the auto saw. So you can use the auto saw and the white rag, like I said, wipe it around the part that's polished, and then wipe it off with a clean rag. And that's going to basically bring that luster back, and also leaves a really fine film on it that keeps the part from, you know, corroding. This is good for short term or something that's only garage kept, that doesn't really ever see bad weather. It's good for that. It's going to last a while. If you're doing on a car that sees weather a little more, this is going to be short term. You might have to do this a little more often, or every time you wash the car, you might want to put a little film of this on. But this does work pretty well. This is a tried and true thing that guys have been using since you know, beginning of time. So the next thing that we came out with is kind of a little more medium to semi-permanent solution. It's Eastwood Metal Protect. So this comes in an aerosol can, and it works on nano barrier technology. So this is actually like a film that goes on. It's not a paint, it's a film that actually you lightly spray on. The idea with this is you spray on real light dust coats along the way, and this leaves a film. And you can actually watch it kind of self-level as you put it on, and this is nearly invisible once it's on. If you apply it correctly, it'll be nearly invisible. So you want to apply this, let it sit, put another coat on. You put maybe 2-3 coats on tops, and this is going to leave that barrier on that will hold up to rain and weather, and you know, even washing the car, this will hold up to it. So the way you can remove this is with like an acetone or pre. You can wipe it off. You don't want to use any kind of etching type chemicals, you know, trying to remove this, but it will come off that way. I've had a car that I used that I daily drove for a year through East Coast weather, you know, winter and summer, and I had it on a set of wheels that I left this on for a year, and it worked pretty well. About after a year, that's when I decided to, you know, take it off and reapply it. So this stuff's pretty good. If you put this on a car that you're garaging, or it's, you know, only a weekend or show car, this is probably going to last the life of the life until you decide to change your wheels or change the parts or whatever, you know, paint it flat black if it's in that season. So that's that. The other thing here is Diamond Clear. Diamond Clear is pretty much our permanent solution to you know, sealing up polished parts or bare metal parts. So this particular, we have a number of different versions for painted and unpainted. This one here is our gloss for unpainted surfaces, for bare metal surfaces. This is the one you're going to want to use for really highly polished parts. Now it is a clear coat, so it's going to dull highly polished finishes a little bit. But again, if you apply it in light coats, you can keep that to the minimum. But this is going to seal it up, and basically, again, it's a clear coat, so you can polish this, well, not buff or polish it, but you can rub it, you can spray it, when you wash the car, and it's not going to come off. You don't have to worry about it as much. So that's a cool little product that you can use to seal it up if you're not the kind of guy that wants to polish your car, polish your parts every time you wash it. And the last one here that I forgot to mention, I just want to circle back on before we take some questions. When you apply too much compound, you're going to see a black buildup here, and this is where I tried to do this on the before we started. Put a little too much compound on there. We were buffing, and you can see there's a black residue that's left. It's a greasy residue. The more compound you have, the worse this is going to get. So if you're buffing an area and you see like a greasy black circle around where you're buffing, you probably have too much compound on your wheel. You need to start over. So you need to use the rake, clean it out fully, and then apply a little bit of compound when you're done. So to remove that, you can use our pre that we say for cleaning before painting. This is great for removing compound without damaging your finish. So I like to use the pre and spray it on, wipe it off, and that'll take it off. This is also great in between compounds. Use this with a microfiber. Wipe the part real good before you change to your new wheel or new compound, and this will take off all the old compounds, so you're not again fighting yourself. So this is a good one. It's also really cool when you get close to the end. Use this, spray it on, wipe it down every so often, and it's really cool to see your progress where you're coming. When you wipe off that little bit of compound, you're like, wow, this thing's really shiny. So keep this around. It's always good to use no matter what you're doing in the shop. So that's all my tips that I have today and buffing talk that we have. Hopefully you guys found it informational. If you have anything else question-wise, I'd love to take some questions. Hopefully I can answer them. I'll do the best. So what's the first question that we have, guys?
Is it better to anodize before or after buffing?
Anodize is actually, it's a plating is the best way to go into it. And like a lot of platings, they seem to work best they work and look best when you have a highly polished surface. So something that's polished, especially again with chrome, chrome's a perfect one. That needs to be as highly polished as possible to get the best finish. So anodizing a similar way. It's gonna, if you have a cast part or something like that, it's not gonna look nearly as nice. Yes, it may stick to it, but it's not gonna look as nice.
How much of mill marks will polishing remove, like fresh made parts?
Okay, so the question was how much mill marks in a part can be removed when you're polishing. So for anybody who's not understanding the question, when some parts that are come out, like wheels and things like that, they're spun or milled, and you actually see the tooling marks on them. A wheel is a perfect example. That's a spun wheel. On the lip, you might see just a bunch of rings, lines around the lip. That's the marks that we're talking about here. If you can feel them with your fingernail, if you drag them across and you can feel them with your fingernail, they're probably too deep to polish out with just a buffing wheel and compound. You may need to go to the expander wheel with a greaseless compound, or you may even go all the way to some kind of sandpaper, do it old school and just block sand it out. You need to get those marks out to a point where you can't feel them with your fingernail, and then at that point, you can probably really move to the greaseless compound, blast through any remnants of that marks, and then start buffing. That's a really good question.
How do you know when to replace the buff wheel?
I don't know if there's a professional answer as far as what the industry standard is. My experience as just a guy in the garage, I use these things till they start fraying pretty badly. If you have a spiral-sewn wheel and you get down to that first bit of stitching, it's probably time to replace that wheel once you start getting into the stitching, because it's going to start coming apart and creating a mess. Wheels like the loose wheels like this that are done for more than finishing, those wheels are probably going to last a number of these wheels before you have to replace this one. But placing buffing wheels, especially on a buff motor, you don't have to do it very often. If you're using the ones that are in the smaller kit, that might be a little more often. But once you get down to that stitching that starts coming apart and fraying really badly, it's probably a good time to throw it in the trash. Well, a lot of guys, I'm sorry, the question, I keep forgetting to give this. The question was, how do we deal with the dust buildup when you're doing a lot of heavy buffing? So a lot of people, if they have the room, it's best to build a corner of your shop that you can kind of just make a little isolated area where you're only doing your polishing, your buffing, your grinding in that area, because that's going to keep it consolidated. Other than having some kind of HVAC system that you can pull it out, there's not really a good way to keep it contained other than making yourself a little room. So one thing you could do that I did in my own little shop is I made a little curtain in my dirty work area that you could pull across and kind of separates yourself. That's going to keep most of the the heavy dust and compounds getting thrown around just in that side, that little nook of the shop. And then the rest where you have some nicer cars sitting or whatever that you don't want that getting on, not too much is going to get on it. So you could do that, just make a little shield or a little curtain that you can put up to block that kind of stuff. Any other questions we have?
What metals cannot be polished?
What metals cannot be polished? I don't know if there is a metal that can't be polished per se. Some metals are better or polish easier, but I mean you could polish, if you take the time, you could polish a cast iron manifold. So you could take a cast iron manifold, work it with the expander wheel, you can work it with the compounds, you can eventually get that pretty darn shiny. Now, each metal naturally has a higher luster than others. So if you have something that's aluminum versus a cast iron, they're not gonna, it's not gonna be quite the same. But you can get most any metal polished. It's all about how much time and patience you have.
Any tips for buffing real small parts?
Any tips for buffing really small parts? The small buff kit is a definite, if you're doing something really intricate, because if you get too small, you can't hold it in your hands and get in here and buff, because it'll grab it and throw it across the room. Now, I've done pretty small stuff, like right now I have a project that I'm doing button head stainless Allen bolts on like everything in the engine bay. So I'm buffing every single bolt in the bay. I've been using pliers, like some walking grip pliers, and I've been clamping down on them a little bit and holding it and just lightly doing it. You can do something like that with pliers. If you can put it in a vise, in a manner, if you have some of the soft jaws for your vise, you could put it in that lightly and work your way around it. It's definitely way more difficult, but I wouldn't advise just trying to hold it with your hand and buff around, because you're probably going to get hurt or damage the parts.
How often do you use a sisal wheel? Would it have been appropriate on that rough sand cast?
The sisal wheel, yeah, that you could, I'm sorry, the question was, when is good to use the sisal wheel? How often should you use it? Sisal wheel, like I mentioned, is step one for really hard metals or rough cast items. So you could use it on the rough cast charger case that I showed you. You could use it on that with either the greaseless compound or the emery, and you can work it with that. So it depends on the part. Generally, with most aluminum parts and softer metals, you wouldn't be using that. You would mainly use that on stainless steel, cast iron, and things like that, little harder materials. If you have to, you could use it on aluminum that's a rough sand casting. But you need to be careful, because that can take away a lot of material. And even with aluminum, you could take away too much. You can dig yourself a little valley with it if you're not careful. But it's really up to you what to use. It's always better to start with a compound or a wheel that's too soft than too rough. So if you work with something that's spiral-sewn and it's not really making a dent in it, then maybe you need to jump up to the sisal. But unless it's something rough like cast iron, you may want to start with something smooth, something more delicate, and work your way back to that.
Can you put the wheels on a portable car buffer?
Really, I wouldn't advise it. I'm sorry. Sorry, I keep forgetting. The question was, can you put a buffing wheel like we're showing here on just a normal like orbital car buffer for paint? It may be able to be done, but I don't think it would be the best situation, because when you're doing those are designed, when you see a buff pad, it's like the top of the buff pad that you're using. So when you're pushing down, you're using the top of the buff pad to push down on the paint and using the top of that wheel. These wheels, so it would basically, you imagine it'd be this part. you need to be using, this is the face of a buff pad right here. So it's actually the, a different part of it that you're using. So it'd be difficult to hold an orbital buff sander. You'd have to basically kind of hold it like straight up and down, really awkward like to buff with that. And it's so awkward you'd probably be just causing more damage than good. So I wouldn't really advise that. I'm not even sure if these would bolt up correctly with that. So you're better to use this or use the small kit with a drill. So that was all the questions that we had that we were going to answer on air. If there's any additional questions that we didn't answer that our tech online didn't answer, we'll be posting them online to our blog next week. We'll also be uploading this to our Eastwood channel, so youtube.eastwoodco. We'll be uploading this video, a recorded version that anybody can watch. Up until then, we'll be loading it on this page here that you're watching it on now. You can watch it there, a recorded version, almost immediately on there. You'll be able to watch that. And if you have any ideas for future tech demos, we really appreciate everybody that's been watching, chatting, feeding back, asking questions. It's really great for hopefully you and also us. So give us some ideas. Drop us a line on our blog as a comment, on Facebook, on YouTube, or just shoot us an email or call one of the sales reps and just give them your idea if you have an idea for another tech demo, and we'll do our best to put out tech demos that you guys want to see. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll catch you next time.